Hello everyone and welcome once again to a new video. This time we will know the Argentine localization for Dynamics 365 Business Central. We will see concepts such as general tax withholdings, income tax withholdings. We will see the concept of perception, additional taxes, different types of invoices, tax classification of our third parties, among other options. Let's start first from the purchasing module, going to our vendor master. Within our master of suppliers, I'm going to select at random the first one. And apart from all the configuration that we give to the supplier, such as general data, address, and contact data, we will find concepts very typical of the Argentinian localization, such as the type of identification. We will be able to select whether it is a foreign identity card, a passport, ID card, etc. We will also be able to inform the identification number for the type that we have previously entered, the type of taxpayer, if it is a legal entity, if it is a public legal entity, if it is a natural person, the type of responsible, if it is responsible for monotribute, non-categorized subject, if it is VAT registered, among others. If it is a foreign supplier, we will be able to select that it is a foreign supplier, and we will be able to select the Incoterms code as well. In addition to this, as a suggestion, we will have the possibility of informing the withholding concepts. Why? So that when we execute a purchase document, the system will suggest these withholding concepts. In the same way, it is only one way. That is to say, I can modify it inside the document without any problem. But here I will always see this suggested item. We are going to report the general tax withholding. Here I make the clarification that depending on the client's needs, we will be able to create as many VAT withholding codes as we need. Okay? I have 3 for the example. The same principle would apply for income withholdings. For example, here I have 2, and I can create as many concepts as I need and want. The gross tax withholdings, I can also link it to the supplier to suggest it within the document. I can also create as many perceptions as I need. Let's also select the province of tax, because there are also provincial withholdings, and let's select that a provincial withholding applies for this supplier. Just as we parameterize the supplier file, we are also going to have extra fields within our product master. Within our product master, apart from associating the general tax, we will also be able to associate what would be the selective consumption tax or the additional tax. For example, here I am going to select it. And the system will have the ability to execute in a transaction in a parallel way the general tax, the selective consumption tax as well. Now we go directly to a purchase invoice, and let's see how it executes these different concepts. Is it okay? Depending on the need, I can start the process from a purchase order or from an invoice. Okay? It is indifferent. It will depend on the need of each of our customers. Let's select the new purchase invoice and select the supplier's name, which, well, in this case we have configured. Then over here I'm going to put an invoice number, and I'm going to select an item and or service. Okay, I am going to select this item, I am going to enter the quantities, and the system will bring me all the tax concepts that apply for what would be the transaction or the invoice. We will be able to select general withholding tax. Here I can modify, as previously mentioned, the VAT withholding, the provisional withholding, and I will also select the service tax. I will also be able to select it. We are going to indicate now a preview of the same, and in VAT movements or in the different modules, we are going to be able to see the effect that all these movements have on the invoice. We are going to enter VAT movements, for example, and here we see the calculation that the system makes for each of the concepts. The state withholding showing me a base and an amount, income withholding, check and amount, and the income with its base and amount and respective label, plus the percentage, and so on with each of the concepts. We see that the base of the general tax withholding in this case would be the same as the VAT amount. That is, the base of the VAT amount of 20%. In addition to this, we also see affected the modules of, for example, movement of the supplier, which is the account payable to our supplier. And here in the initial amount, it is already debugged. Okay, the transaction, adding taxes, subtracting withholdings, adding additional taxes. The amount that we see reflected would have all that note. And in accounting movements, we see the accounting affectation that causes all these amounts at the accounting level. Here we are going to be able to visualize the distribution of the different amounts to each of the accounting accounts. For example, I have 15,000. I review the account selected consumption tax. Here I have that was charged. For example, the VAT withholding. This point is fully parameterizable. That is to say, I indicate to the system to which accounting account I want each of the withholding or additional tax concepts to go. Withholdings or additional taxes. That is to say, here we see all the effect that these different movements cause in each one of them. These different movements cause in each of the Business Central modules. After that, we will be able to register. And thus our purchase invoice is completed. Then I can go to visualize it in the history. Another type of document that we can issue in the purchase module is the purchase debit notes, or the purchase debit notes. This type of document is not part of the Business Central standard, which we have developed. What would be the purchase debit notes that are in process? As you can see, and the history of these debit notes. The design of this type of document corresponds to what would be the architecture of Business Central, okay? So let's note that you have a general section, a line section, and so on. Let's select the name of the supplier, okay? It's going to be the call of our test provider, and we put in the debit memo number. In this case, I am going to use the same one that we use to identify it internally. Here I am going to select the related invoice to which the debit note is going to be related. I can make the call of product and or services, in this case a product. I add the quantities. And in the same way, we are going to have the different concepts of taxes and withholding. Both general tax withholdings as well as withholdings of provincial taxes, additional taxes, and so on. We are going to show you a preview of the record to check that everything is correct. We will also be able to visualize the affectation that this type of documents makes to each one of the modules. For example, here, showing me the base and the calculation of each one of the taxes and withholdings. And here in accounting, the distribution of each of the amounts to the accounting accounts. Finally, we are going to record the debit notes, this debit memo, and we are going to go to the history of debit notes. Then here we have it, and here are stored all the debit notes that we are going to execute. Now within the sales module, we are going to have the possibility of create different types of documents. I am going to enter a sales invoice directly. We already know that we can start from an order, from an invoice. It will depend on the needs of each of our customers. We are going to select the number of the client, the code of the client, and then we're going to go to select the type of document. We can issue different types of documents, among them invoice A, invoice B, invoice M, invoice C, ticket A, B, and M, and each one of these documents will have its own or relative number. That is to say, here I have invoice B. This invoice B has its own numbering. For example, invoice B we have that begins with the acronym B. And if we make the change, for example, to our invoice A, we see how the series changes to invoice A, and that invoice A will have its own numerical correlative. Okay, here we simply add this information, and we add what would be products and or services. Quantities. And within the sales module, we are also going to be able to visualize each of the tax and withholding columns, okay? And withholding, okay? If we apply it, and if it is the customer's specific need, we can also add the withholding concepts within the sales invoice. Okay? Okay, now we are going to register our document, and it is saved with the type A invoice code. We go to the history, we can visualize what would be this sales invoice type A as it is saved and marked in our invoice history. Is it okay? For example, we can see other types of documents that we have previously issued. Now within the sales module, we are also going to have the ability to create our debit notes, to create our debit memos. The debit memos, here we can select different types of debit memos. For example, over here I'm going to make the call for of my customer, and I select by default comes debit memo A. But I can select any of the ones I have marked. Each one will have its own numerical correlative. I can select debit memo A, debit memo B. Look how the record number changes, the debit memo ticket, and so on. We are going to select the item and or services. We already know that we can use accounting accounts, items, product charges, and we are also going to have the different tax and withholding fields within each of these debit memos, okay? Debit notes, okay? Each of the items such as withholdings, general taxes, but withholding, taxes, selection, consumption, and perception. Let's finally indicate the record, not without first linking the related invoice, to indicate that this will be the related invoice, and we are going to register our document, and it will be stored in the history of sales debit notes. Posted. Here we have it, and here our debit note is saved. Debit note. We can also issue what would be different types of sales credit notes, okay? Sales credit notes, okay? For example, we're going to enter to one that is already set up. We're also going to have the type of document that we can select, whether it's a credit note, A, B, a monotributo, or a credit note, a ticket, etc. Okay? In this way, we can issue different types of documents to later carry out the electronic stamping process. And last but not least, I invite you to like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and activate the notification bell. I also invite you to visit our website and get to know everything we do as locations, implementations of Business Central, our flagship LLB retail product, trainings, webinars, and much more. Thank you and see you in a future installment.